Thank you guys for joining us again to the On Point podcast. I'm here with Brother Greg. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining. Well, Brother Greg, you preached this morning, and you preached about a message you titled it, "Where Did Everybody Go?"
Right.
And so I guess my first question for you would be, what inspired you to put this message together? Thank you all for joining us for another episode of On Point, where we dive deeper into Sunday morning's message. If you enjoy this, please like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who might be interested. We are available on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Enjoy.
Well, it's funny. Many years ago, when I was in church, I was probably your age, and I remember the pastor at the time. He had said to me, this life that we live, it's not a cloak or a jacket you put on when you go into church, and then when you're done, you take it off. It's not a job.
Yeah.
It's a life, And I'd love to say that from that moment, my commitments were always great, but they weren't, But this was just kind of a reminder to me that, this isn't just something that we should do a couple times a week, like we're clocking in and out.
Yeah.
It's something that matters for our everyday life.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus said himself, if we want to be followers of him, we got to pick up our cross and follow him daily.
Right.
So
Right.
That's true. And well, you did say something. You talked about people sometimes they may be doubting what they believe. Like you talked about what they felt at the altar, what they felt in prayer, and that touch they had from God. People start doubting that. Why do you think that happens, though, in your walk with Christ?
To me, I think what happens in a lot of cases is people have an experience that they have that encounter with God, that it's a life-changing, it's a bookmark moment, right? Mm-hmm. But then we sit on it, and we want that to carry us through the next weeks, days, years, whatever our lives, and that's not what it's intended for. It's to promote us to a more consistent walk. And a lot of times what we do is we take those moments and we make them isolated bookmarks.
Yeah.
And I think what happens in that is the enemy uses that stuff because he knows that we get content in the victory, but we don't sustain it. And so life comes back at you. Monday comes for all of us, and the realities of bills and responsibilities and those things hit you. And if you're still living on Sunday from 3 weeks ago, it's really easy to get that washed out and you lose it, and I feel like we lose our voice because we get downtrodden from the world and what it brings.
Yeah. And so how do we stop ourselves from doubting? You say we sit on it, we sit on that maybe that feeling we had on a Sunday. How do we stop ourselves from doubting throughout the rest of the week? What would some things you would say for that?
I think that, it's funny, when I was younger, and I'm going to get to your, when I was younger, we used to go to camp and wonderful moves of God would take place, and you would just feel the presence of God, and you would just sit in it when you were done. And then when it would end, everyone would seemingly kind of go back to what they were before the service, right?
Yeah.
And that always kind of confused me because I felt like, not that people should like walk in some kind of spiritual, animation or something, but like sometimes it felt like it was just an event. And then when the event was over, that got compartmentalized, right? And so when we do that in our walk, sometimes I feel like, Sundays have been so much traditionally like, this is our tradition of church, whatever, if it's a Pentecostal church or it's another assembly of faith, whatever. And when it's done, you've clocked in and out, but it's hard to maintain, your victories. It's hard to maintain that value when you don't carry it beyond the moment. And for me, it's been a learning curve of almost 49 years now of, if you're not going to maintain this intentionally, I know. Yeah.
You said 49 years, I'm like, oh.
I know I look 20, but I'm 49, almost. But yeah, if you don't carry that intentionally, if you don't make that an effort, it's just like work. If you go to work and you have a great day on Monday, but then you call off Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you're not going to have a job. That one day doesn't sustain you for all week. You have to be consistent,
All right, that was a good one. Well, why is it important that we stand up for what we believe in? You kind of talked about that, how we got to stand up, Why is that important?
Because the world and every influence out there is telling you what they believe. More than ever, it's so much in your face. You don't have to even ask to be told what people feel, what their values are, or what they think your value should be. And as the church, I feel like you're almost feeling apologetic when you want to stand up for what you believe. But in reality, you're doing the same thing that the world's doing.
Yeah.
And I think we suppress that and we allow the influences of everything else kind of manage our life.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think I talked about it last week with Pastor. I'm not sure if I did or if it was at a Bible study. I don't remember. But I remember I was talking and I told how, the world is looking for a difference, you know what I mean? They're not looking for the same thing, they're trying to find the difference. So if we're out there doing the same thing, acting the same way, what are we doing,
Yeah.
And, it kind of reminds me of I guess a little story I have, kind of relates to standing up what you believe in. I, back in school, when I was back in my younger days and like senior year, I was doing track, and, I did the year prior and I was doing track again that year. And, my teammates, they joked around. They're like, "Oh, this is Pastor Lucio," because I never went out to drink with them. I never went out to smoke with them. I mean, I was friends with them, but I never went and did the stuff they did. And they kind of stopped asking me because I kept saying, "No, I don't do that stuff." I always talked about how much I went to church, how much I love God, and people don't realize it, but like when you do stuff like that, people are watching you. And someone told me that when I first got into church, it matters what you do because you never know who's watching you. And that kind of stuck with me, And this is such a great example because, I went my whole year, the whole season now, I wasn't doing none of that. And towards the end of the season, one Sunday I wake up to a text message from a track teammate saying, "Hey, Lucio, I know you go to church. Can I come with you?" And I was like, no, I didn't say that. I told him, yeah, of course. I said, I had, I knew he lived because I dropped him off before, you know what I mean? And so I picked him up that Sunday, loved it. He came Sunday night, got the Holy Ghost that night, got baptized the next week. And it just shows that people watch you, you know what I mean? Your influence, it matters to other people. And that's why it's so important that we don't act like the world, that we don't talk like them, that we don't think like them, you know what I mean? It's just, we got to be the difference. And that kind of reminded me when you talked about how we got to stand up for what we believe in. Because if I never stood up for what I believed in, and that would have been just another lost soul,
Yeah.
And so.
Well, and I think to that, the worst thing that anyone could say to me is if they find out, I go to church and do things. If the first time their response is, "Oh, wow, I didn't know you went to church," that's a terrible, feeling, right?
Yeah.
Because that means my life hasn't shared anything that would lead them closer to Christ. And, you have to be careful when you're talking about standing out and being vocal because, again, I know, speaking from a little bit more age now, I remember what the world looked like 20 years ago, and it's so different now. And you have to keep your voice, but you have to do it with, you have to season it with salt, man. You have to make sure that you're tempered and how you talk and being respectful, but you also can't get washed away.
Yeah.
And so there's that balance there. But the world of witnessing today is so much different and harder, I would say, for your guys' generation than it was when we were coming up.
All right. And you talked about the world. This one kind of correlates to the last question, but you talked about the world distracting us, And what does it do to us when we allow it to distract us? How does it affect us?
I mean, the worst feeling, it's like if you're in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
And you're getting caught by the tide, and you don't even realize it, but you're slowly getting pulled out farther and farther while you're just thinking you're enjoying the swim. And that's what the world does, man. It will allow you to just feel like you're treading water, but it's all the while pushing you farther away. And that's the intentionality you have to have about living for God. Because it's not one of those things to where it will stop if you stop. Whether you're pursuing God or not, the world is continually pushing you in the direction it wants you to go.
Yeah.
So it's not a measure of, well, I don't want to or I choose not to. You're going to get pulled in the draft. You know, it's going to pull you out. So that's what I mean. Like you have to be mindful that every day you're not doing something, you really are being pulled. Yeah,
and I guess that's why it would be important to be daily in His Word and His prayer and His presence.
Yeah.
Bishop Ellis always talked about. He did a Bible study talking about being Spirit led, and that spoke to me a lot. And I guess that's one way for us to not allow the world to, like you say, pull us farther and farther. Is if we're Spirit led, and how are we Spirit led? pastor talks about it all the time. Back to the basics, prayer,
Yeah.
Bibles. You know what I mean? You want to know more about God and how not to be pulled away from the world. We have a whole book about it, you know?
Right.
And, well, coming to my last question, it would be, what advice would you give to someone who feels like they've been doubting, or someone who feels like they've been pulled so far away? What advice would you give someone?
I mean, the first thing I would say to them is it's not as bad as you think. You're not as far away as you feel like you are. Don't isolate yourself. Don't put yourself out there without anybody, because you need that. You need, and the other thing I would say to that, and I've shared this many times when I spoke, is that find good, trustworthy people that you can confide in, that you can lean on, that you can be real with, because the world, like we're human, and life comes at you in real time. So we don't have to pretend that we're these spiritual all-stars that just, always have to be succeeding or it's a failure. We have to be able to be real with somebody and say, I'm struggling, man. And I need you. And the first way to find yourself in a big hole is to isolate yourself and get away from that. So I would tell people, find good, godly people in your life that you can trust, and that they're not going to harm you with your vulnerability. They're going to help you.
Well, I guess that would be advice for people of God, churches, people in the church, to be that good, godly person for someone to depend on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my old pastor used to say it all the time, you never know, but you got people depending on you, you know what I mean? You fall, they're going to fall, you never know.
Sure.
And I guess that kind of reminded me of what you said, find good, godly people you can depend on. And I guess my advice to the people of the church, be that good, godly person that someone can depend on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I talked to you, and I know probably finishing up, but
Take your time.
There's been many times I talked about how influencing, even if you're a retrovert, you're quiet, you're reserved, withdrawn, you still impact thousands of people with your life. So whether you're in church sitting or whether you're out there talking, people watch your life. So you're right. And I would also encourage people, like, don't hold yourself to an impossible standard. Do not set expectations for yourself that nobody can get and then beat yourself up when you fail.
Yeah.
And don't beat yourself up when you fail, period, because the Bible is full of misfit toys, right? We've all fallen short.
It says a righteous man falls 7 times but gets back up.
Right.
Well, I thank you for joining us this
was
morning.
great. Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us on this podcast, and that's on point. Thank you for listening to the entire episode. If you found this enjoyable, please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the message. We post to Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube every week. You can catch the entire sermon on all those feeds. We would also love to see you in person at North Point Apostolic Church at 3544 Vernon Road, Stowe, Ohio, every Sunday at 10 a.m.